Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope we're
Good
all well.
morning.
Um, welcome to the live stream. Welcome to the Professional Nurse Advocate live stream with the University of Derby. Should we begin with some introductions? Because we've got a new guest today, haven't we?
We
We've got a new
have.
guest today who's going to chat to us. So my name's David. I'm the discipline lead at the University of Derby in the team that's supporting our PNA programme. Do you want to go next, Vicky, and then we can introduce Tracy?
Yeah, so I'm Vicky Cockrell. I'm the Assistant Discipline Lead in Pre-Qualifying Healthcare at the University of Derby, and I'm also the Programme Lead for the PNA programme.
Great. And Tracy, who are you?
Hi, I'm Tracy Whitmore. I work here at the University of Derby and I'm the Programme Leader for Nursing Associates, and I'm also teaching on the PNA online programme.
Yeah, brilliant. So welcome, Tracy. Tracy's going to join us this week. We've got lots of things to talk about. We'll probably be about half an hour, I think. And just to say, I think this is our third stream that we've done so far. Keep the questions coming in. We're happy to start picking them up and chatting to them. And again, before we go any further, if anybody wants to be a guest like Tracy is, please get in touch with us. It's pna@derby.ac.uk. We'd really love to chat with you on this stream about the PNA role and how it's working for you. So Vicky, what's happening this week?
So this week we're focusing more in the module on leadership and education. But what I want to do is I want to think about what we were looking at last week, because last week we were looking at the implementation and thinking about clinical supervision and how that plays into a part of the PNA role. But I've got to say, everyone, the discussions within the module have been really interesting. And what we found is when we're looking at those implementation of clinical supervision and thinking about how we're going to supervise our team, one of the things that's come up is actually how are we going to bring that into the team? So this is where the leadership is going to be really applied, isn't it? And I know within the module we've talked about actually what happens with the staff that are perhaps a little bit resistant. We talked about the fact that we have had staff, and we ourselves might have had clinical supervision that has not been particularly good quality. There has been some confusion about actually where people have thought they've got have been having clinical supervision, but in reality what they actually have been having is either managerial supervision, or in some cases I've been having safeguarding supervision, which is very different to a peer-focused clinical restorative supervision. So I think it's quite interesting to think about how do we then start to talk to our team about it? How do we think about how we're going to implement it? So I know in the module I've been talking to our students about thinking about actually Lewin's force field analysis. Maybe it's quite beneficial to think about the driving and the restraining forces that we're going to be faced with when we're implementing what effectively is a change. We're bringing in something new, aren't we? We're bringing in clinical supervision. So I think it's interesting for us to think about it from a leadership role and to think about how we're going to really bring this on board within our teams.
Yeah, so the professional nurse advocate role is a new one, isn't it? For nursing, anyway. Midwifery has had this role for a couple of years, and one of the reasons we asked Tracy to come and join us here today is Tracy is the program leader of our nursing associate program, and the nursing associate role is very different to the PNA role, isn't it? We know that, and we think that probably at some point in the future some NAs may become PNAs. But actually, there's a lot we can learn from that, isn't there? And the reason that we mention that is because that's something that's happened in the last 4 or 5 years. It was 2016 when we started talking about nursing associate, and that has changed a lot in our profession, hasn't it? The way people work and operate. There's been other things that have happened before it, but there will be, I'm sure, somebody sat at home watching this. Maybe there's somebody, I don't know, who's thinking, well, actually, this is a new role. I've got to implement this within my team or my trust, my organization. And how am I going to go about that? And how am I going to feel about that? And I think what we're here to say, Tracy, is that it's all right, isn't it? That actually this will be a challenge. Have you got any kind of comparisons from when the nursing associate was introduced?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. They did find it really, really challenging because the role came about really quite quickly in a similar way that the professional nurse advocate role has come about for nursing, just as a result, obviously, of the COVID pandemic and other, historical need for this kind of role. But with the nursing associates, what we found is particularly the first cohort had quite a hard time of it. And they really had to build up their resilience to people in practice. So within the university, we were all really happy to have them and to support them and with their academic work, with their practice supervisors and assessors. However, there were some people that found that their role really was very misconstrued. It was felt that they were going to take over the role of registered nurses, that they were just a cheap nurse. There was a horrendous national Twitter feed that students came and showed me that was really derogatory of the nursing associate role. And I had students in tears over it. So we had to find a way to really support our students to advocate for the role and to explain the role. And that continues right up to now. We've had several hundred nursing associates through on the programme, and it is actually getting easier and the role is becoming more recognised. So I think probably the things that they did was to actually go into an area and say, I would like to tell you about the role. I would like to tell you about what I'm doing at university. I want to show you my practice assessment document so that you understand what it is I need. And I think those kind of practical things actually did help our students and continue to help them.
Yeah, so the lesson there, I suppose, is for somebody who's becoming as part of this program or is becoming a professional nurse advocate, is you mentioned three things there, really, really, really good things for me. You mentioned about advocacy, which actually is one of the themes of this week, isn't it? We'll talk about that in a bit. But resilience and having the strength to carry on, and resilience is a very deep topic, isn't it? It's not an easy thing to get into, and it's not something which you can turn on or off. You have to have it developed over a long period of time, don't you? And there's lots of multiple factors that give you resilience. But that was something, you're right, that we found that they really needed. And you will need this as a professional nurse advocate as well, because the times will be difficult. At some point you will find it probably quite difficult to do your role. There may be some challenging things that come up, but you need to have that resilience to keep going on. And the third thing you said was about telling others. And for me, that's part of the reason we're here doing this. We're telling people about it, aren't we? And I remember that sort of there was a lot of discussion at the time, probably in 2017, 2018, from registrants just generally, about nursing associates, and there has been about other roles in the past. I wouldn't say it's anything unique to nursing associates. It's about change, isn't it, and changing in the way our professions are. But that conversation is really important to have, isn't it? And I would say that's the same for professional nurse advocate. What we're doing is led by NHS England, we're changing the structures and the shapes of how our professions work. That will be difficult for some people. It will be difficult to think about. Well, you talked about the change models, Vicky. I like the unfreeze, make a change, refreeze. We're in that bit where we're making a change, where we're trying to unfreeze. A practice that's happened the same way for probably 100 years in some cases, or probably at least 20 or 30 years. We're
Absolutely.
changing it completely and building a new system, and that takes a lot of hard work, doesn't it?
And I think we have gone through an unprecedented time. The global pandemic has created a need for change. But with any change, I mean, again, you mentioned Lewin's theories of unfreeze, move, refreeze. But it is thinking about all of those change theories and actually thinking about what type of leader you are to actually make that change. So actually, it's such an exciting opportunity, and our PNAs that are coming onto the programme will be able to see that vision. They've got that innovation to make those changes, but it's about thinking about how, from a leadership perspective, we are going to bring that in, and how are we going to develop that change, and how are we going to actually move and make that change. And it's been really interesting, because actually some of the things that we've been looking at is the vast areas that some of our PNAs are going to be covering, and actually thinking about how we're going to do that. How are we going to get that across all these services? How are we going to be able to make sure that the value of the P&A role can really be seen, far and wide, as it were, and actually bringing it into that practice and making it, and what we're trying to do, aren't we, is we're trying to make it that it becomes it just becomes part of practice. And it's exactly the same as the NA role. What we're trying to do with the NAs is just make sure that they're part of our team, aren't they? Our NAs now in many areas are recognised, respected, and we're getting there with that, and we will with the PNA role. But there will always be some challenges. There will always be a little bit of scepticism somewhere. And I think with the PNA role, we're pushing quite a lot for clinical supervision, aren't we? We're pushing for that restorative supervision, because we can see the value of it, and we can see the fact that our team needs that. But one of the restraining factors, maybe one of the things that are pushing it back, is that people have either had supervision previously and they've seen no benefit because it's perhaps been the way it's been carried out, or the fact that it's not been consistent. And what we're saying is actually we've got a good research-based evidence for the fact that this role will work, and that there are values in all this restorative supervision. But what we've got to do is we've got to embed it within our system and our services, haven't we? And this is the challenge. This is where our leadership role within the PNA is really valuable and really required to make sure that we can do that.
And I think so. Just to add to that, Vicky, you said about the evidence. The evidence is we should always be led by evidence, shouldn't we, as healthcare professionals? That's what we're evidence-based practitioners. There is a lot of really good evidence for clinical supervision, isn't there? Restorative supervision, there really is. When we began the when we began the nursing associate journey, there was a mixed set of evidence, wasn't there? Let's be honest. There was a variety of evidence, and since that time, there's been more evidence. There's been evidence come out. There still, I would say, hasn't been definitively good evidence. It's emerging, isn't it? But why am I saying this? Because part of this program is about not just preparing you to deliver the role, but also to evaluate it and to think about the evidence base for being a professional nurse advocate. So I think the call to action with this really is, evaluate your role. Talk about your role as you do it, and we want to see, and NHS England, I think, would like to see that of, if you've implemented it in your trust, perhaps you're the only person, perhaps you're the person in your area or your division or whatever, your team. Tell people, write posters, write papers, write articles. Tell the world about your role, and then what will happen is people will pick that up and they turn them into systematic reviews, and they turn them into wider evidence syntheses that look at what the set of evidence is for your role. And the only way we can get to that is if people start to think about it and write about it. And people want to know what the challenges are, don't they? They want to know what the benefits, the barriers to implementation have been. So this part, I think, of what we're trying to say is capture everything that happens as you go through this. That's vital. Capture what's happening and how things, even if it's just like a reflection on your role, write something about it. And we're not all necessarily academic nurses. I'm not a very academic nurse. I think of myself as being more practical. I must be academic. I work in a university, but it's fairly straightforward to write something about your role and how it's worked. So that's our call to action, is to do that, I would say.
Absolutely. And what I would say as well is that actually the NHS England are going to be doing a PNA conference. And so actually what we are going to want is we are going to want poster presentations. We are going to want you to be presenting your findings. So, for those of you that are on our program at the moment, I know this YouTube vlog goes wider than our students, but for those of you that are on our program at the moment, with your portfolios, we're encouraging you to think about how you're putting this into practice. But in doing that, what we also want you to think about is we want you to be exactly what David has said. We want you to be evaluating it. We want to be thinking about how can we research it. So, I am quite happy for you to come to me and say, actually, I've got a bit of a research proposal, because actually through the university, we can support you with that as well, can't we, David and
Yeah,
Tracy? We are
absolutely.
happy to support you if you want to complete some research about the experiences and the creation of the role within your area.
I mean,
And it's exciting.
there's probably somebody sat there thinking, hell no. I'm not, I think that's, let's be honest, there's lots of people who think, oh, that's my worst idea of hell. I did my degree and I don't want to do anything else. That's okay. Um, there are some of us who are really interested in doing that sort of thing. So even if, even if you are not interested in doing it, we can work with you to do it. I suppose that's what we're here to say as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we
And
have
a
got people who can
poster.
work with you. Yeah.
Yeah, we can look everything from, developing poster presentations, perhaps that we can take to the PNA conference and it's going to be in Birmingham. We know where it's going to be. It's going to be in Birmingham. We know it's sort of due July-ish time, but I think that's at the minute is all the information that we've got. So we're just waiting for more information to come out from NHS England on that one.
There you
But
go.
it is exciting. It is, and it will be a mixture of in person, we are hoping, and virtual. So it's going to be a really exciting opportunity. So it'd be really great. So if anyone wants any support to start to develop that, either their posters or think about some research, we're here to help you with that, and we're here to support you.
So I'm going to take us off in a little bit of a different direction. Tracy, sorry, did you want to say something? Did
I
you
was
want
going
to?
to just say, you said there may be people out there saying hell no. So for those people that are saying hell no, I'm with you on that one. We all are. We understand that. So I think we just need to take it back to thinking about how you are going to implement the role within your area. That is the fundamental reason for you coming on the program. So by working out what's going to work in your area, whether that's you're going to, talk in team meetings, for example, as we've said, put up some kind of information on a staff notice board, those kind of things. That's what you need to discuss with your managers. How can you have the time to do this? How are you going to format it? And how is it going to work? So that's the fundamental thing. Then once you've got that bit done, you then want to go on and to actually do a poster and all of those other things that Vicky and David have spoken about, that's when you can do those. So I just
Some
wanted to
people, some people
bring it
might,
back a
some
little
people
bit.
might be really interested in doing a PhD in it, Tracy. You never
They
know.
might be, but it's for all. That's what I think our pre-qualifying healthcare team is so good at, is actually finding what's right for each individual student.
Mm.
It's not just about a one size fits all. Everybody has a place.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, so I'm going to go off on the other tangent now, just for the last probably 5, 10 minutes, if that's all right. So this week is about leadership, isn't it, Vicky? Like you said, it's also about
Yeah.
education, and there were sort of like 5 key attributes. People might have read this in the module. If not, they probably will do. And if you're not in the module, well, you may do someday. Who knows? But there were 5 sort of like key attributes, and I just wondered if we could just have a bit of a talk through those. And how can people develop them if they don't have those skills already, and what we think maybe they need, I suppose. So the first one was advocacy, which I think we've kind of talked about, haven't we? And that is what PNA is all about, isn't it? Professional nurse advocate. And advocacy is a hard thing to do, isn't it? It's a difficult thing to develop the skills of. And in your role as a PNA, you're not just helping the people that you work with, but you're also being an advocate for them and for the profession, aren't you? And I'm hoping that as we go through this, we can meet some people who are really good, strong advocates for the profession. Hopefully, you can guess that we are good advocates for our profession. We're very passionate about nursing, extremely passionate about nursing, and about the people who work in nursing. Tracy just said there's a place for everybody, isn't there? And that goes for nursing, I think, in general. So, um, advocacy, I would hope people have that skill probably already as a nurse, that they've developed those skills, but maybe that's something they want to develop some more. The second skill was problem solving, and problem solving is a really key part of this, isn't it? It's you may be presented as a PNA with some issues or things that you think, goodness me, there's no way through this. I can find this. How do people cope with that? What do you think? I don't know. I'm asking my colleagues here, my friends.
I think you have
What's the
to
solve? How do you solve my problem, Tracy?
partly you need to know your local processes for
Yeah.
escalating concerns. That's obviously a fundamental thing. But I think it's more than that, isn't it?
It is. I
Yeah.
think one of the things that we've talked about in the module, and I think I've done this in the personal blog, so it's perhaps not gone wider, but actually one of the things that you can do is actually you can do a cost benefit analysis. Now, I use that in supervision, I use that in CBT, but I also use that in my day-to-day role as a lecturer. I suppose we look at actually what is the cost of something and what are the benefits, what are we going to win and lose, and actually writing those lists and thinking about and actually weighting things can really help to think about where things are going to be really advantageous and where things are perhaps not as advantageous, or it's going to be a restraining factor, or what that's just it's just a nice tool, and it's simple. It's just a list.
See, I think we should be more basic than that. Personally, this is a personal view, completely personal view. Just to contradict you, Vicky, which happens a lot. So it's okay. I think that we should. I think solving problems is easy. That's going to be a controversial thing to say. I think you should do what is right and what is fair.
Well, I'm going to come back. So for people that don't know David and I, these discussions happen so many times, don't they, Tracy? So
we argue a lot. It's all right.
Professional debate.
We love a professional debate, absolutely. So what I would say to you also as a professional nurse advocate is actually, is your role to solve problems, or is your role?
Oh, that's very true.
Or is
That's
your
why she's a
role
psychotherapist and I am not. You see, that's the.
Because actually your role is actually, isn't it, to use those. So I would use Socratic questioning, I would use some guided discovery because that's my background, but the idea is actually, if we solve people's problems, does that really help them? If we teach people to solve their own problems and we support them in solving their own problems, actually this is where the resilience then builds, isn't it? And we can build people's confidence to say, actually, yeah, I can support myself, I can work through that. So actually,
that's good. You see, that's
I think actually, Vicky, it's just the same as if you were supporting a student nurse.
Yes, it
You
is. Yeah.
would not solve all and give them all the answers, would you? You would expect them to actually think for themselves and think, how do I do that? What's the best way to do that? And with guidance, that's how you work. So it's very much the same.
You don't build resilience if you solve things for people. You
Yeah.
build resilience by supporting people to solve their own problems. So, and I think, and this is again coming back to the module, we've had this discussion because we do have, we have had a discussion in the module that actually sometimes as nurses we're so caring that we want to fix things, we want to solve those problems, and actually what we have to do is support, and we have to develop those competencies in others to be able to do that.
Brilliant. See, I'm always learning. Communication was the next sort of attribute. I mean, I think as nurses, we generally are probably quite good communicators, as on the whole. We tend to select people for being good communicators. We focus very much on training people to be good communicators, don't we? And then we maintain those skills, and there's other things you can do, like courses and stuff you can do for advanced communication that people do. But as a PNA, communication is vital, isn't it? With the people who you are supporting, like you were saying, but also in maintaining records and, the transfer of other things. It's a vital skill, isn't it?
It ties straight back into advocacy, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Really. We've got to be good communicators. We've got to have those skills.
Yeah. The fourth one. Oh, go on. Sorry, Tracy.
Oh, sorry. Communication, though, can sometimes it's often the thing that's complained about the most.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
And the thing that breaks down a lot. Yeah.
And the thing that absolutely. So it does come across often as a negative impact, and I think part of that comes back to what we started to discuss was people not understanding what the role of the PNA is. So that then it ties very nicely right back to that beginning discussion, saying we need to get out there what this role is, what the expectations are, and how it is going to work in your area. And then once people are aware of what that is, then you can have all of the other types of, communication related to having meetings and all of those things, which are obviously vital within the
Yeah,
role.
and the
But I
rest
think
follows.
that's where that communication on a wider level is going to be really important, and is
Yeah,
probably the first step.
and just that ties really nicely into the next value actually, which is influence.
Mm.
Next attribute is influence. So you can't influence, can you, without being that good communicator and like you say about introducing your role and finding where your role is within your environment and what you intend to do. I suppose it's about having influence. Influence for me is also related to advocacy. I
Yeah.
think being able to influence is also being an advocate for somebody or something, isn't it?
Yeah, and it links into leadership, doesn't it? So actually, if we think about transformational leadership, it is that there is an influential role in that. So, and I know, again, coming back to the module, what we've been talking about is actually starting to get those discussions in with the teams to say, actually, this role is here. And actually that two-way conversation of, this is what we've got as a guide to what the role is. This is what we've got as the information. What do you think about it? How does that work for the team? So, that inspirational innovation, trying to get those discussions, it does ties in beautifully with transformational leadership, doesn't it, really?
It does. And the last one, which also ties in with that, is collaboration.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
perfectly. All
absolutely.
intertwined, aren't they?
So, well, I think we're coming on for time nearly. We're nearly half an hour, so we could chat all day probably. But is there anything that we kind of want to wrap up with, or we want to say? Have you got a last word, Tracy? I guess you may not do. I don't know. Have you got a last word in today's session,
Just one.
or some advice that you might give
No,
people?
I think work out what the role is yourself, and go back to all of the module materials that you've done so far. Work your way through, look at your reflections and the your assessment, your portfolio that you need to do, and actually really use that so that you have a good understanding of what you think you would like to do within the role, because I think everybody will take a slightly different approach.
Mm,
And it's like, anything we do, you've obviously mentioned some forms of leadership. There's lots of different types of leadership. There's lots of different ways of doing things. When we're caring for somebody, we all would we'd perform a dressing in a different way, but it would still be right. And so I think that's really what to take away is you're going to mold the role to what you and your team actually need.
So it is what you make it as well. That's what
Mm.
you're saying, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, that's
brilliant.
much more than one word.
That's okay. That's okay. Okay. Anything else from you, Vicky, today?
No, I suppose the only thing that I would say is one of the things that we've looked at is supervision. We've looked at leadership. One of the things that we're bringing into our module at the moment, and I'm just asking people to think about, is actually we're talking a lot about supervision and leadership in the P&A role. Actually, the P&As themselves also need supervision. So it's also about, we as carers, we think about others. We also have to think about ourselves, because actually we are still prone to burnout, even if we are a P&A. So actually one of the things that I would like people to think about in that P&A role is, yes, you are going to be a supervisor. You are going to have supervisees. You are going to have a leadership role. You also need your own supervisor. So actually start to think about who's going to support you. And it might be that you develop a network of P&As that support each other, but you need that support. So I think that's a really important point that I just wanted to bring in at the
Yeah,
end.
absolutely. And just to say, there are already networks forming, aren't there, of PNAs?
Yeah.
So I know there is a critical care network for PNAs, and they're looking at, I think it's done through the CC3N. Um, they want to form a network of all the PNAs in the country, so they can sort of network and talk to each other. But then we can also think about how the role is implemented in critical care and how it works. So that's just the one I'm aware of. I'm sure there'll be others as well. But there are areas like, for example, community, children's services, mental health, etc. There will be definitely other networks. So networks are vital, aren't they? For all
Absolutely.
those things, the last thing on that list was collaboration, wasn't it? Collaboration with others is vital, isn't it? So, okay, well, that's the end of our stream for today then. Tracy, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a really good conversation today. And so that's it from us, from me and Vicky and Tracy today. I won't tell you what's next week because I can't remember. But because we've had such a good conversation. But we'll put it in the announcements so people are aware. But yeah, thanks very much. And we'll see you next time.